From a script written as one continuous sentence to a comedian crawling out mid-screening, a real car crash that injured 9 people. And production design by the future Oscar nominee behind Eraserhead, this bizarre blaxploitation musical hides secrets stranger than its cloning villain dressed as Colonel Sanders. Fact 1. The entire script was one sentence. When George Armitage sat down to write the screenplay for Darktown Strutters, he decided to take an unconventional approach that would make any film school professor raise an eyebrow. The entire script was written as one continuous sentence from the first page to the last, with no periods to break up the action, dialogue, or scene descriptions. What makes this even more remarkable is that Armitage completed this unusual writing experiment in just 3 days. He later explained that he wrote the script purely as a fun creative exercise, not intending it to be a serious dramatic work, but rather a playful way to explore storytelling structure. The single-sentence format meant that the script flowed continuously without traditional breaks, creating a stream of consciousness style that matched the chaotic, surreal energy of the film itself. Armitage had previously worked with producer Gene Corman on other projects, so when he pitched this bizarre concept, Corman was willing to give it a shot. Originally, Armitage planned to direct the film himself, but he ended up stepping away to work on another screenplay called Trophy, which he described as a labor of love about 2 police departments that end up in a shooting war. Unfortunately, that project never got made, and Darktown Strutters became the only feature film produced from his 3-day, single-sentence writing spree. The unconventional script structure perfectly matched the film's wild, anything-goes approach to blaxploitation satire, creating a movie that defied traditional storytelling conventions in almost every possible way. Fact 2. Richard Pryor literally crawled out. After William Whitney completed filming Darktown Strutters, producer Gene Corman wanted to get some feedback before releasing the film, so he organized a special screening and started inviting people to watch it and offer their opinions. Among the guests Corman invited was none other than Richard Pryor, one of the most influential comedians of the era, who was known for his sharp wit and brutally honest takes on race relations in America. Pryor's opinion would have been particularly valuable since Darktown Strutters was attempting to satirize racial stereotypes and blaxploitation tropes, which was exactly the kind of material Pryor tackled in his own groundbreaking comedy. The screening began and everyone settled in to watch the bizarre spectacle unfold on screen. With its over-the-top costumes, slapstick comedy, and surreal plot about a cloning conspiracy involving a Colonel Sanders lookalike. As the film progressed through its outrageous scenes of motorcycle chases, musical numbers, and racial satire, George Armitage sat in the theater watching the audience reactions. About 3/4 of the way through the movie, Armitage happened to glance down the aisle, and that's when he witnessed something unforgettable. Richard Pryor was literally crawling out of the theater on his hands and knees. He wasn't just getting up and walking out like a normal person who didn't enjoy a film. He was crawling, perhaps trying to make a stealthy exit or possibly making a comedic statement about what he had just witnessed. Armitage remembered this moment years later when discussing the film's production, and it became one of the most memorable behind-the-scenes stories about Darktown Strutters and how even comedy legends found the film too bizarre to sit through. Fact 3. Real car crash injured 9 people. One of the most shocking incidents during the production of Darktown Strutters occurred when the crew was filming a bank robbery scene on location in Los Angeles at the corner of 4th Street and Washington Boulevard. The scene required actors to stage a dramatic robbery with all the typical elements you would expect: people running, shouting, and general chaos that would make it look like a real crime was taking place. Unfortunately, nobody properly warned the general public or secured the area adequately to prevent passers-by from stumbling into what appeared to be an actual crime in progress. A woman named Erlina Ardoin was driving past the intersection when she saw what looked like a genuine bank robbery happening right in front of her. Believing that real criminals were committing a real crime, Ardoin did what many people would do in that situation. She panicked. In her frightened state, she ducked down in her vehicle to avoid being seen by the supposed robbers or potentially getting shot. This panic reaction caused her to lose control of her car completely. The vehicle careened out of control and crashed into 3 parked cars along the street, causing significant damage and injuries to 9 people who were in the vicinity. The accident was serious enough that it led to legal action and investigations into how the production was being managed. What started as a routine day of filming turned into a nightmare scenario that highlighted the dangers of filming realistic crime scenes in public spaces without proper coordination with local authorities and adequate measures to inform and protect the public. Fact 4. The city paid $27,000 in settlements. The aftermath of the car accident during the filming of Darktown Strutters led to serious legal and financial consequences that extended well beyond the production itself. After Erlina Ardouin crashed her vehicle into 3 parked cars and injured 9 people because she thought the staged bank robbery scene was real, the victims naturally sought compensation for their injuries and damages. The case went before a Superior Court commissioner who had to determine who was responsible for the accident and the resulting injuries. The commissioner's ruling was particularly damaging to the city of Los Angeles, as the court found that the law enforcement and security provided by the city during the filming was inadequate to protect the public from exactly this kind of dangerous situation. This finding placed significant liability on the city government for failing to properly manage the film production and ensure public safety. According to a news brief published on November 2, 1977, more than 2 years after the accident occurred, the city of Los Angeles had already paid out $27,000 in settlements to the victims. To put this in perspective, $27,000 in 1977 would be equivalent to well over $100,000 in today's money, making it a substantial financial penalty for the city. Even more concerning, the news brief indicated that additional settlements were still pending, meaning the total cost to the city would likely climb even higher as more claims were processed and resolved. This incident became a cautionary tale in the film industry about the importance of properly securing filming locations, adequately warning the public about staged scenes, and coordinating with local law enforcement to prevent innocent bystanders from being harmed during production. Fact 5. 2 directors quit before filming. The production of Darktown Strutters went through an unusually chaotic series of director changes before cameras finally started rolling with William Whitney at the helm. The first director attached to the project was actually the screenwriter himself, George Armitage, who had written the bizarre single-sentence script and naturally wanted to bring his own vision to life on screen. Armitage had a specific idea of how the film should look and feel, which made sense since he had created this surreal world of female motorcycle gangs, cloning conspiracies, and racial satire. However, before production could begin, Armitage received an opportunity to work on another screenplay that meant much more to him personally. The project was called Trophy, and Armitage described it as a true labor of love about 2 competing police departments that end up in an actual shooting war with each other. The concept excited him so much that he asked Gene Corman to excuse him from directing Darktown Strutters so he could focus on developing Trophy instead. Corman agreed, and Armitage stepped away from the director's chair. Unfortunately, despite all his passion and effort, Trophy never actually got made, which Armitage later admitted was a disappointment. After Armitage left, producer Gene Corman brought in a director named Joe Viola to take over the project and bring Armitage's script to life. However, Viola also ended up leaving the production before completing the film, though the specific reasons for his departure are not well documented. Finally, William Whitney came aboard as the 3rd director attached to Darktown Strutters, and he was the one who actually finished filming and delivered the completed movie, bringing his decades of experience directing action serials and westerns to this wild blaxploitation comedy. Fact 6. Oscar-nominated designer's early cult work. Among the crew members who worked on Darktown Strutters was a young production designer named Jack Fisk, who would go on to become one of the most respected and celebrated production designers in Hollywood history. At the time he worked on this low-budget blaxploitation comedy in 1975, Fisk was still early in his career and taking jobs on smaller independent productions to build his skills and reputation. He was responsible for creating the satirical and exaggerated environments seen throughout Darktown Strutters, including the over-the-top sets that helped establish the film's surreal, cartoonish tone. Just 2 years later, in 1977, Fisk would work on his childhood friend David Lynch's cult classic Eraserhead, where he served as production designer and even appeared on screen as the Man in the Planet. From there, Fisk's career skyrocketed as he became the go-to production designer for legendary director Terrence Malick, creating the stunning visual worlds for films like Days of Heaven in 1978, The Thin Red Line in 1998, and The Tree of Life in 2011. His meticulous attention to detail and ability to create authentic, immersive environments became his trademark. Fisk's extraordinary work eventually earned him 3 Academy Award nominations for Best Production Design for Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood in 2007, Alejandro González Iñárritu's The Revenant in 2015, and Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon in 2023. Looking back at Fisk's filmography, it's fascinating to see that before he was building authentic 19th century oil derricks and recreating entire historical towns, he was designing the absurd, satirical world of Darktown Strutters with its wild costumes, exaggerated sets, and intentionally over-the-top aesthetic. Fact 7. Director was a Roy Rogers Westerns legend. William Whitney, the man who finally completed Darktown Strutters after 2 other directors left the project, was an unlikely choice to helm a blaxploitation musical comedy about female bikers and cloning conspiracies. Whitney was already a Hollywood legend by 1975, but his reputation had been built in a completely different genre, classic westerns and action serials from the golden age of Hollywood. He was particularly famous for his long collaboration with cowboy star Roy Rogers, having directed an astounding 27 Roy Rogers Western films between 1946 and 1951. These films were hugely popular with audiences and helped cement both Rogers and Whitney as major names in the Western genre. What made Whitney truly revolutionary, however, was his innovative approach to filming action sequences. He pioneered modern fight choreography techniques by watching how Busby Berkeley staged elaborate dance numbers in musicals and realizing that fight scenes could be choreographed and shot in exactly the same way. Instead of filming brawls as chaotic free-for-alls, Whitney broke down each punch, kick, and stunt into carefully planned shots that could be edited together to create exciting dynamic action. He would undercrank the camera to speed up the footage, making ordinary stunts look death-defying and spectacular. These techniques revolutionized how action was filmed in Hollywood and influenced generations of filmmakers who came after him. Director Quentin Tarantino later called Whitney one of the greatest action directors in the history of cinema. So when Whitney took on Darktown Strutters late in his career, he brought decades of experience staging kinetic action sequences, which helped give the film's motorcycle chases and fight scenes a level of professionalism that elevated the otherwise chaotic material. Fact 8. It was the director's final feature. Darktown Strutters holds a bittersweet place in William Whitney's filmography because it marked the end of an era for the pioneering action director. After a prolific career that spanned nearly 4 decades and included directing or co-directing 24 serials, 64 feature films, and hundreds of television episodes, Whitney's work on this bizarre blaxploitation comedy would be his last theatrical feature film release. He had started his directing career way back in 1937 when he was just 21 years old, taking over the serial The Painted Stallion, when the original director was fired for alcoholism and falling behind schedule. From there, Whitney became one of Hollywood's most reliable and efficient directors, churning out serial chapters, B-westerns, and action films with remarkable speed and consistency. He directed everything from Dick Tracy serials to Roy Rogers westerns, to low-budget science fiction films like Master of the World with Vincent Price and Charles Bronson. His career had taken him through the entire evolution of Hollywood, from the studio system era through the rise of television and into the exploitation film boom of the 1970s. By the time he made Darktown Strutters in 1975, Whitney was 60 years old and had already accomplished more than most directors achieve in a lifetime. While he continued working in television for a few more years after Darktown Strutters, he never directed another feature film for theatrical release. The film represents the final chapter of his big-screen directing career, making it a fascinating bookend to a journey that began with black and white serials in the late 1930s and ended with this colorful, outrageous satire that couldn't have been more different from the westerns and action serials that made him famous. Fact 9. Star was first black Bond girl, Trina Parks, who starred as the fearless motorcycle gang leader Serena in Darktown Strutters, had already made history in Hollywood just 4 years earlier in a role that would forever cement her place in cinema. In 1971, Parks became the first African-American woman to appear as a Bond girl when she was cast as Thumper in the James Bond film Diamonds Are Forever, which starred Sean Connery in his return to the iconic role of 007. Thumper was not a typical Bond girl who served as a romantic interest for the secret agent. Instead, she was a villainous henchwoman who worked as a bodyguard for the film's antagonists. In one of the movie's most memorable scenes, Thumper and her partner Bambi attacked James Bond at a luxury villa, engaging in a fight sequence that showcased Parks's martial arts and dance training. Parks had been encouraged by her agent at the William Morris Agency to audition for the role specifically because the producers were looking for someone who knew both karate and dance, which were exactly the skills she possessed thanks to her extensive background as a professional dancer and choreographer. During filming, she even had to kick Sean Connery hard in a fight scene, which she admitted made her nervous at first, but the stunt was properly protected and went smoothly. Her appearance in Diamonds Are Forever broke barriers and paved the way for other black women to appear in the James Bond franchise in subsequent films. After her historic Bond role, Parks appeared in Darktown Strutters and The Mothers before largely stepping away from film acting to focus on her career as a dance instructor, choreographer, and theater performer. Fact 10. Co-star became Magnum PI icon Roger E. Mosley, who played the character Mello in Darktown Strutters, was still building his acting career in 1975 and appeared in several blaxploitation films during this era, including Hit Man, Sweet Jesus Preacher Man, and The Mac. However, his role in this bizarre comedy would be completely overshadowed by what came just 5 years later when he landed the part that would define his entire career. In 1980, Mosley was cast as Theodore T.C. Calvin in the CBS television series Magnum P.I., which starred Tom Selleck as a private investigator living in Hawaii. Mosley's character was a former Marine who ran a helicopter tour service called Island Hoppers and frequently helped Magnum solve cases by flying him around the Hawaiian Islands. The show became a massive hit and ran for 8 seasons from 1980 to 1988, with Mosley appearing in 158 of the show's 162 episodes. Interestingly, Mosley was actually a licensed helicopter pilot in real life, though the producers wouldn't let him fly the helicopter on screen for insurance reasons, so they used a stunt pilot wearing fake muscles instead. Mosley also refused to have his character smoke or drink alcohol on the show because he didn't want black children seeing those behaviors from someone they might look up to, and he insisted that TC shouldn't be portrayed as broke, rejecting the original writer's idea that his character's business was struggling. After Magnum P.I. ended, Mosley continued acting in films and television, and he even came out of retirement in 2019 to make a guest appearance on the Magnum P.I. reboot series. Sadly, Mosley passed away in August 2022 at age 83 from injuries sustained in a car accident. Fact 11. The Dramatics' feature film debut, The Soul Group. The Dramatics made their feature film debut in Darktown Strutters, appearing in one of the movie's most memorable and musically significant scenes. The group had already achieved considerable success on the charts by the time they were cast in the film, particularly with their hit song What You See Is What You Get, which had reached number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100 and earned them a gold record from the Recording Industry Association of America in 1971. The song was distinctive for combining soul music with Latin rhythms, creating an irresistible sound that stood out from other R&B tracks of the era. Originally from Detroit, the Dramatics had been signed to the Memphis-based Stax Records label, which was home to many legendary soul and funk artists. In the film, the Dramatics appear as hostages who have been kidnapped and imprisoned in the underground dungeon of the villainous Commander Louisville Cross, the Colonel Sanders lookalike who runs a fried chicken restaurant chain and is secretly plotting to clone black community leaders. During their scene, the group performs What You See Is What You Get in its entirety while trapped in the dungeon, turning what could have been a brief cameo into an extended musical performance that allowed the film to showcase their talent. The scene is surreal and bizarre, with the well-dressed soul group singing and performing choreographed moves while imprisoned, creating a strange contrast between their polished performance and the absurd kidnapping plot. This film appearance marked the Dramatics' only venture into cinema during the height of their fame, making it a unique artifact of the blaxploitation era that captured one of soul music's most successful groups in a fictional narrative rather than just a concert film or documentary. Fact 12. Re-released with completely different title. The theatrical release history of Darktown Strutters is almost as strange as the movie itself, with the film experiencing a long delay and a complete title change depending on where audiences saw it. After filming was completed, the movie first premiered in Cleveland, Ohio on August 13, 1975, where it earned respectable box office numbers in its opening week. The film then opened in New York City on October 8, 1975, where critics and audiences got their first chance to experience this bizarre blend of blaxploitation, musical comedy, and science fiction satire. However, despite opening in these major markets in 1975, the film did not make it to Los Angeles, California until more than a year later. When it finally opened in the city where it was filmed, on January 5, 1977, the movie had been given a completely different title for its Los Angeles release. Instead of Darktown Strutters, which referenced the classic 1920s jazz standard Darktown Strutters Ball, the film was retitled Get Down and Boogie, presumably in an attempt to make it sound more contemporary and appeal to disco-era audiences who might be attracted to a title that emphasized music and dancing. The long delay between the New York opening and the Los Angeles release is unusual for any film, especially one that was actually shot in Los Angeles, and suggests that the distributors struggled to figure out how to market this strange movie to different audiences. The title change to Get Down and Boogie represented a shift away from the historical jazz reference and toward a more generic, trendy title that might appeal to audiences looking for upbeat entertainment without knowing anything about the film's wild and satirical content. Fact 13. Runtime changed for different releases. When Darktown Strutters finally opened in Los Angeles under its new title, Get Down and Boogie, in January 1977, audiences who had heard about the film from its earlier releases in other cities might have noticed something different beyond just the title change. The film had apparently been re-edited between its initial release and its Los Angeles debut, resulting in a noticeably shorter running time. Reviews of the New York opening in October 1975 reported that the film ran for 90 minutes, while other early reviews cited the runtime as 93 minutes, suggesting there may have been slightly different cuts circulating even during the initial release. However, when the Los Angeles Times reviewed the film after its January 1977 opening as Get Down and Boogie, the running time had been reduced to just 83 minutes. This meant that somewhere between 7 and 10 minutes of footage had been removed from the film for its Los Angeles release. The reasons for this re-editing are not entirely clear from historical records, but it's possible that the distributors felt the film was too long and needed to be tightened up to improve its pacing, or perhaps certain scenes didn't test well with audiences and were cut to make the film more commercially viable. Another possibility is that some of the more controversial or offensive material was trimmed to make the film more palatable to Los Angeles audiences. Whatever the reason, the re-editing means that different audiences saw meaningfully different versions of Darktown Strutters depending on when and where they watched it, with the Los Angeles version under the Get Down and Boogie title representing a significantly shortened cut of the original film. Fact 14. Quentin Tarantino endorsed the cult film. Despite receiving mixed reviews when it was first released in 1975, with many critics finding it too chaotic, unfunny, or offensive to recommend, Darktown Strutters gradually found a devoted audience. Over the decades that followed, the film became a cult classic among fans of blaxploitation cinema and obscure exploitation films, appreciated for its sheer audacity and willingness to push boundaries in ways that few other films dared. One of the most influential voices to champion the film was none other than Quentin Tarantino, the acclaimed director known for his encyclopedic knowledge of exploitation cinema and his love of overlooked B-movies from the 1960s and 70s. Tarantino, who has frequently cited obscure films as major influences on his own work, publicly praised Darktown Strutters and called it a ridiculous satire. Coming from Tarantino, who had already established himself as a serious student of film history and whose opinion carried tremendous weight in film circles, this endorsement helped elevate Darktown Strutters from a forgotten curiosity to a film worth seeking out and reconsidering. Tarantino's appreciation for the film makes sense given his well-documented love of blaxploitation cinema, which influenced several of his own films, and his particular admiration for William Whitney, whom he called one of the greatest action directors in Hollywood history. Tarantino has always had a talent for finding value in films that mainstream critics dismissed, and his support helped introduce Darktown Strutters to a new generation of film fans who might otherwise never have heard of this bizarre experiment in racial satire, slapstick comedy, and musical blaxploitation that pushes every boundary imaginable. Fact 15. Produced by Roger Corman's brother. The story of how Darktown Strutters made it to theaters involves one of Hollywood's most famous filmmaking families, though not in the way you might expect. The film was produced by Gene Corman, who was the older brother of legendary B-movie producer and director Roger Corman. While Roger Corman became far more famous for his prolific output of low-budget genre films and for launching the careers of directors like Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, and James Cameron, his brother Gene was also an active producer who specialized in similar types of exploitation and genre films. Gene Corman initially produced Darktown Strutters for a film company based in Tennessee that was supposed to handle the distribution and release of the finished film. However, the Tennessee company ran into problems and was ultimately unable to secure a theatrical release for the movie, leaving Gene Corman with a completed film and no way to get it into theaters. Rather than let the film sit on a shelf gathering dust, Gene turned to his younger brother Roger for help. Roger Corman had founded New World Pictures, an independent distribution company that specialized in releasing exactly the kind of low-budget exploitation films that Darktown Strutters represented. Roger agreed to release the film through New World Pictures, which finally got the movie into theaters in 1975. This family connection saved Darktown Strutters from potential obscurity, ensuring that audiences would have the opportunity to experience George Armitage's bizarre single-sentence screenplay brought to life. New World Pictures became known for releasing provocative and unconventional films that major studios wouldn't touch, making it the perfect home for this wild blaxploitation musical comedy that defied easy categorization.